I remember when my oldest son, Sage, was playing 4 or 5-year-old soccer. And he was running down the field, and this other kid shoved him out of bounds, and he fell and scarred himself up. And his mother went, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God!" And he looked at me and I said, "Get out there." So he went back out there, and they came running down the sideline again. And Sage sent this kid flying. Problem solved. So that's the kind of independence I think that kids today need to express, need to have, and it's just that so many parents are so scared, and they've scared their kids of the real world.
Not one other kid in this neighborhood does chores.
You're gonna get in trouble, Murtaugh.
Hey, Mom! Can we get some meatloaf?
He started it.
Mom!
What?
Shut up!
What is the matter with you?
I know it's a school night, so we're just gonna get right down to it.
Hello, my name is Harry H. Harrison Jr., and I want to welcome you to the very first edition of When Will They Ever Leave? This is a parenting show for parents of young children, as well as for parents of 27-year-olds still living at home. And the show is also for those 27-year-olds still living at home because they have not been taught how to function in the adult world. So, a word about me. I'm a New York Times best-selling author, father to son, life lessons on raising a boy, and father to daughter, life lessons on raising a girl, have sold over 1 million copies each. All told, I've sold over 4.5 million books that cover parenting for moms and dads of small kids, teenage kids, and even college students. In fact, 1,001 Things Every College Student Needs to Know is still a perennial bestseller. I've spoken on 100 radio shows. I'm the Fox News radio parenting expert, and I have no less a luminary than James Dobson quote me an entire passage of my book. So, that's me. What makes me an expert is that I raised 2 boys into adulthood, and they became quite exceptional, so much so that some friends of mine were saying, "You need to write a book about raising boys because your kids are so amazing." And then my 15-year-old son, about 2 days later, said, "Dad, you ought to write a book about raising boys." So I thought, well, how many hints do I need? So that's what started me writing books on parenting. My books are written like proverbs, easy to read and digest. Like this thing from the 1,001 Things college book, you need to know to forget what Mr. Rogers told you years ago. You're not special. In fact, there's a lot of room for improvement. So that's the kind of humor but fact-telling I tell. Or from the father to son book, teach him to throw up in the toilet. Many boys will walk past 2 functioning bathrooms, destroy your bedroom, and this is written from personal experience. So finally, parenthood is supposed to be fun. And it is, after a good night's sleep, or after your 2-year-old turns 3, or the night before your daughter gets a driver's license. But I'm serious about one thing, and that's teaching parents to teach their kids how to function in the adult world. Now, any podcast requires a co-host, and usually a female, because generally they're smarter than the other sex. And in this case, we have several moms who would join us, sometimes collectively, sometimes individually. Right now, Kristin Merron is with me. She's a first-time mom of a 6-month-old son, William. She's married, a millennial homeowner who faces the everyday challenges of a full-time mom and full-time employee, raising a newborn, which I wouldn't wish on anybody.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Harry.
Yes. So today's topic, and also with us is producer Zach Lewis, who is unmarried and childless, millennial, who thinks he knows stuff and doesn't know anything, but he will volunteer information based on absolutely no knowledge.
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Harry. Glowing review. I appreciate it.
So just so you know who the expert here is.
Right.
So what started me writing, obviously, was after about 9 books, I became aware of how little young teenagers and older teenagers and young 20s were ready to face the adult world. They didn't know at the time how to open a checking account. My son, who is now a dentist, called the fire department over a leak in his toilet. And I'm thinking, didn't we cover that? Who you call over leaking your toilet?
How bad was the leak, Harry?
It was bad.
It was a 911.
It was a 911 call.
It was
but
worth it.
I'm thinking,
911.
didn't we cover this in 7th grade? That a plumber you call for a leak, not the fire department.
Fire department.
apparently we didn't. So that started me thinking, man, if he's not ready for adulthood and he's in dental school, nobody's ready.
Right.
So that's what started me really focusing on preparing kids to succeed in the adult world. To that end, today's topic is going to be taken from the New York Times. They've written several articles about today's millennials who are wary of freedom.
It's a popular topic, isn't it? Today's millennials.
It is a very popular topic,
Yeah.
and nobody trusts them. I don't understand why.
It's
I
weird.
know as a boomer, I hope to God they get their act together because I've got Social Security due.
Yeah. Well, I'll pass that along to the other millennials. I'll share that with the tribe when I get back
let
to
them
camp.
know that my future depends on them like working. So one article in the New York Times talked about how anxiety has increased so much in teenagers. It's
This is a super interesting topic.
Anxiety in teenagers.
why are more American teenagers than ever suffering from severe anxiety?
Right. What are we so scared of?
I think losing your iPhone, or not being popular, or more to the point, and we can certainly delve into this, I think their parents are sheltering them so much that the idea of graduating or entering the adult world without mom scares them to death. Now, they're probably anxious about getting into college. They're probably anxious about getting out of college. And now I'm not talking about teenagers who walk out the door and are facing bullets on the south side of Chicago.
Right.
You know, that's an anxiety that we can't deal with here. But we're talking about typical middle to upper class kids who should have no worries.
Sure.
Spending a lot of their parents' money on anxiety therapists and camps. I think Kristin found one camp that cost $950 a day.
Oh, good Lord.
A day.
A day?
A
day.
day.
Wow. All right.
And with the hope that, being around trees and leaves and ponds would relieve their anxiety. I
Right.
think.
Let's just think about that. I mean, if you had like I don't want to diminish the problem
No,
of
not at
anxiety,
all.
but say that you're an alcoholic or you have a drug addiction, you get sent to a rehab facility.
Right.
$950 a day for an anxiety rehab
Yeah.
facility.
You just need to mellow out, man. That's what's going on.
Just slow down.
yeah. Just hang out in the woods with your friends.
So the Times reported that the American College Health Association found a significant increase to 62% in 2016 of undergraduates reporting overwhelming anxiety.
All right. Well, there's a couple angles you can approach this from. On the one hand, either undergraduates don't know what real anxiety is,
My
Right.
approach.
or maybe we don't understand what they think is anxiety. Maybe it's a little bit of both. I don't know.
Or is the word anxiety just kind of being thrown out there so
Right.
frivolously that everyone thinks that they have anxiety and it's not being even properly diagnosed anymore?
Right.
Well, I think it's all that, but I think you can just label it one word. It's not Reaganomics and it's not Obama. It's parents.
Uh-huh.
I think parents have done such a sensational job of sheltering their kids and protecting them from every known bug and disease and bully and harsh words from a teacher and failing a class that they've been trained to know mom can take care of everything, but they can't take care of anything.
Right.
So I think just the thought of leaving mom to go fight for themselves in college or in the adult world scares them to death.
Which is an intriguing opinion because I feel like most of the time we like to kind of follow those generational lines and say, well, no, it's because they're a different generation. They just don't get it. You're approaching it and saying, well, maybe it's something the parents are doing.
I
which
think
is
it's
weird.
something, yes, I think it's something parents are doing. And not to cast aside the pressures of social media and
Of
Facebook
course.
and being liked by Facebook. And, of course, my impression is, well, if you're getting bullied, get off. What the hell? Why would you sign up every day to read that you're a twerp? That just makes no sense to
Sure.
me. Just, and if you're the parent, take away the phone, kill the Facebook, and your kid won't be bullied anymore. I just don't see why you would keep going with that. So, okay, we're about to close out of this segment. Next segment, we will introduce Kathleen DeNooyer, and we will delve more deeply into this topic of anxiety. Welcome back to When Will They Ever Leave? I'm Harry H. Harrison Jr., and for this segment, I'm joined by Kristin Merron and Kathleen DeNooyer. That's spelled weird, but it's pronounced DeNooyer.
Hello.
And I just want to read you a couple lines from the New York Times. This article was titled "Why Are Millennials Wary of Freedom?" and this was published this October. And it says in 1995, 16% of Americans in their late teens and early adulthood thought democracy was a bad idea. 16%. Today, that's 24% of young Americans are not enamored by democracy. A 2015 poll from the Pew Research Center found that 40% of millennials ages 18 to 34 believe the government should be able to regulate certain types of offensive speech. I'm not talking about aliens here. I'm talking about Americans. Okay. And researchers have linked this kind of thinking to helicopter parenting. Kids today have a lower degree of self-confidence. Another study showed that teenagers and young adults are less likely than those of past generations to engage in a range of activities that involve personal independence, such as working for pay, dating, driving, spending time with friends without adult supervision. Colleges and universities have exacerbated the problem of dependence by promoting what is sometimes called a culture of victimhood. American college students, who are the safest and most privileged people on the planet, are to be protected from and encouraged to be ever vigilant about and even report any behavior that could cause emotional distress. So
what do you take from? Let's go back to the first piece, Harry. The piece about democracy. Kind of what do you take from that?
I take from that we're not teaching civics,
Right.
in school. That would be like a key thing to here's communism and here's socialism and here's democracy and so we're not teaching that. And for some reason, kids thinking democracy is dangerous, which is wild. And obviously, these kids have never lived in China or North Korea to learn what a dictator communistic state looks like. So I don't think they're well traveled. I mean, they may go to Switzerland to ski, but they haven't seen Romania and they haven't seen Estonia, and they haven't seen
Is this the
Siberia.
first time that you've heard of this problem of kids, kind of being afraid of democracy, or is it something that you've been kind of hearing in the background?
The only time I was afraid of democracy was when they were drafting for the Vietnam War. And then I was all about something different. But no, I've never heard of this. This is a new thing for kids to be afraid of democracy and for kids to not. And I'm sure anybody raised with a degree of independence cannot wait to leave home. I mean, I couldn't wait to get out of the house. I couldn't wait to drive. And today's kids are not anxious to leave home.
So is that the connection? You think that's the direct tie, having that lack of dependence and not appreciating democracy? Is that kind of where the problem lies?
Yeah, they see speech. Okay, so it's go back to that article that talked about that speech that they find threatening. For whatever reason, they find speech threatening. It could be a right-wing speech or a left-wing speech, but oh my God, this scares me to death. So they don't want to hear that. They don't want to feel threatened by a campus talk. So they protest against the right-wing people coming, against the left-wing people coming, because their little ears can't stand to hear it. So I think that's where it begins, is that you think free speech is dangerous, and if free speech is associated with democracy, which it is, then democracy must have some problems.
Yeah, I think Harry, you're right. Everything goes back to one central theme that you've always been talking about, and it's you have to be able to take the bad. If you cannot accept the bad of life, whether it's bad speech, a bad moment, a bad game, a bad grade, if you cannot accept the bad of life, there's no way you can appreciate the good. Because when I hear someone who's saying speech that I don't like, I just turn my brain down. I just don't make space for it in my brain. It works really well.
I know, and yet kids will read it and focus on it and take a pill for it and go to a $950 a day camp to deal with it.
Right. So we're talking about this anxiety epidemic and strategies that you can use to help your child cope with the real world. And that stems back to this idea of them being afraid of the real world, being afraid of free speech, being afraid of what's out there. So what can we do today or at this moment to help start that conversation with our children?
Okay, well, let's start with identifying the parents that can. I mean, if you have a 27-year-old living in your master bedroom ordering pizza delivery, you're lost. Game's over. But, if you have a young child or even a middle schooler, maybe even a teenager, the first thing you can do is cut the cord. You can cut the cord between you and the principal and between you and the teacher and between you and the coach. I remember when my sons were playing soccer, at a 6-year-old level, the coach told them, "You carry your own bags. You can play on this team. Mom isn't going to carry them. And if you forget your bag, you don't play." So, and moms, I don't want you reminding them. This is how they grow up. So I think cutting the dependence cord is the most basic thing. The other thing is parents today are more interested in their kids' happiness than their kids' independence or I say excellence. And what I mean by excellent is the ability to function and succeed in the adult world. And we're not training our kids today to be excellent. We're training them to be dependent. And that, because if they're dependent on us and we deliver, then they're happy. So we're after their momentary happiness of whatever we can buy them, whatever we can allow them to do, however late we can let them stay out, whatever new Beamer they want. It's all about momentary happiness, and it has nothing to do with them learning any independence.
So this is a conversation that you and I have had kind of off the mic before, Harry, but we talk about parents being heroes all the time. They're, moms are kind of rushing in to save the day. If something's going wrong, they're coming in, and you're saying we can't be the hero all the time.
Not even most of the time. We can't be the hero, but just some of the time. Because again, we're not teaching our kids the opportunity to learn resilience, to develop grit. We're so focused on, as we've joked about, but truthfully, $1,000 birthday parties for 1-year-olds and $700 Burberry coats for 4-year-olds. And those things are so. If parents can afford that, then that's very fleeting. Then what do you do when they're 2? And what do you do when they're 3? And do you fly them to Paris when they're 16?
Well, and Kathleen, I think this is something that you can relate to just as a mom. As mothers, we naturally, we want to be the caregiver.
Absolutely.
If baby's crying, we want to be there to tell them that everything's going to be okay. And so how do you find balance between being the safety for the child, because it's important that they understand and have a sense of safety with their parent, but also being the enforcer?
Well, it's very hard to be both. So my wife was like a lot of mothers who just wanted her kids to be happy. And I would say, I'm not raising happy kids. I'm raising young adults. And that was my focus, was future adulthood. She didn't want them to work because they were too young. I wanted them to work so they would learn how to work. So there was a natural tension between the two of us. But I think there's a huge difference between cradling a 1-year-old or 2-year-old or 3-year-old who's crying and doing the same thing with a 5-year-old when he doesn't need to be crying. He needs to get up and walk away.
Like my 8-year-old, there are times when I literally have to say to myself, nope, you cannot hug her. You cannot be the ooey gooey 8-month-old baby mommy. You have to be the mean one. You have to stand there with the rigid, mean face.
Give
And how
Kathleen
hard
a
is
gold
that?
star. That is perfect.
Right? But that's a
Applause for
hard
Kathleen,
thing to
yes.
do.
It is hard to do, but kind of for me, one of the early on things was when she was pre-verbal and she started walking and she would fall down and toddle. My ex-husband and I were married at the time. We would not go, no. On the opposite, if she would grab something or fake that she was in pain, I would walk up and squeeze it. And I would squeeze it real hard because if she screamed, we had to go to the hospital. If she didn't, she was fine.
That's great.
So, but that's
Squeeze test.
That's training myself. That's the squeezing my ooey gooiness out of me at moments when I know I need to, and it's working.
Good. Would you like to add something, Kristin? I mean,
No.
your baby is all of 6 months old. Are you beating her or him into submission yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. I need to be the safety and the support for him
course
at this
you do.
moment. He needs to understand that mom means safe and mom means good, but
Of course he
he's
does.
not even to the point where he's walking or crawling or falling down yet. So
Right. You still have some time.
Sometimes, but there does come just like Kathleen said, there does come a time where you realize, well, this child shouldn't be crying, or that this is just to get my attention, and that's when it can either get real dangerous for a parent, or I guess it gets harder for moms. It's not as hard for dads.
But it's revealing. It's personally revealing when you can step past what you want to do emotionally as a mother and do what's better for the child.
Oh yeah, I remember my wife telling me my 17-year-old son was working too hard at school to have a job, and I just said no. He's going to work on weekends. So mothers, I think, are naturally protective, and I think the sole purpose of fathers, besides to make a baby, is to toughen up a child. Is to say you've got to stand on your own 2 feet, because moms are not good at that, in my humble opinion.
In your humble opinion.
In my humble opinion.
In your humble opinion.
In my
Yep.
fatherly dad opinion.
Yeah. Credit where it's due.
So okay, this has been a great session. We're going to go to our next session in a couple of minutes. Again, I'm Harry Harrison, and you are listening to When Will They Ever Leave? Stay tuned. Hello, I'm Harry H. Harrison Jr., joined in studio again with Kristin Merron and Kathleen DeNooyer. We're going to continue this conversation about anxiety and kids. There was something I wanted to read you. Again, this is from the Times this month. So Kathleen brought up something that is so important. If we don't let kids fail or suffer in childhood, how can we expect them to know how to fail or suffer in adulthood? And I think that's one reason they are so anxious, because they see the end coming and they're just not prepared to face the adult world. And the other line was, parenting culture has become increasingly guarded and safety focused. Helicopter parenting is prevalent, preventing critical development for personal independence. So you have parents that are making it hard for kids to become independent.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting because when the child is young, all you see is the child, and you're not necessarily thinking about this is going to be an adult one day. This is going to be a person. And so I think a lot of parents don't, take that beat and kind of think about the future, because you almost, as a parent, you kind of have to be looking into the future. If you're going to be raising this person into an adult, you can't always be thinking of them as your baby. But as parents, that's what we tend to do. We think of them as the baby, and we treat them as the baby, and they're always our baby in our mind.
They are, and then they're their baby when they're 18.
And then we have 27-year-old babies
That are still living at home.
They're still living at home.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Kathleen, Harry invited you in today because you kind of have an interesting perspective to share about anxiety, kind of from a personal, perspectives. So can you kind of go into that a little bit?
I'll summarize it really quickly. So I am 34. I'm at the top of the millennial generation, and my parents were the opposite of helicopter parents. When I was a child, I was a latchkey kid from the age of first grade. So 6 years old, I was walking home. I had to go home, let myself in, let the dogs out, do my homework. And at that age, I also rode 3 miles through the ghetto to my gymnastics school every single day, and I did 20 to 25 hours of gymnastics every single week. So my responsibilities were pretty grandiose at a very young age, and so that led to a different trigger for anxiety. But as an adult, I realized through my parenting that I had a massive amount of anxiety. So I went to a therapist, dealt with it for 3.5 years, and I actually understand better now how to treat any sort of anxious moments my daughter has. I wouldn't say she has anxiety at 8 because I'm working really hard on it, but I know when to sort of step back and step outside of myself. And like you said, Harry, just sometimes I let her fall flat on her face, and I'm there to tell her I love her, but beyond that, she has to kind of figure out life.
Well, obviously, I'm not talking about the independence you kind of suffered at the age of 6 or whatever. I mean, that's just not responsible parenting. But we're delving into the families that can afford $950 a day for therapy camp because they've never let their kids touch independence, and their kids are scared witless of what's going to happen.
Well,
Right.
I think that's the opposite side. Sorry, Kristin. I think that's the opposite side of what I experienced.
It is, totally.
So there has to be a balance somewhere in between.
I'd recommend a $950 a day camp.
For me,
Well, and Harry, you brought up the point earlier that, we're not talking about Chicago, or we're not talking about kids who are actually in, treacherous environments where their anxiety is grounded because it's actually unsafe for them to walk out of their doors during the
Right.
day. But we're talking about children in affluent neighborhoods whose parents can afford to send them to, these rehab centers, $910, $15 a day. $915 a day. I mean, think about the kind of money that you have to have just to be able to afford, $5,000 a week. That's crazy.
Think about the kind of money that put them there.
that's exactly what I was thinking.
In terms of buying everything and granting them everything.
Throwing money at every single
Throwing money at
situation
everything.
instead of forcing them to deal with their grades as they are, moving them to a more expensive school, things like that. I have parent friends who do that.
Well, Kathleen, you recently shared a story about a parent that you were witnessing kind of at a tutoring center, one of these moms who had all of this money and was just kind of throwing money at the problem but not parenting.
Yeah, unfortunately, I won't go through the whole story, but essentially, instead of sitting down and taking the time to go through her daughter's mathematics problem by problem by problem, which would have been my solution, instead of engaging the child, she took the child outside and punished the child in the parking lot in a way that actually caused me to call CPS because I was so scared. She came back in, still did not engage with the child in her mathematics. That's not parenting. That's just throwing money at situations.
No, that's just, you have an accessory that's a 5-year-old. So, we were talking about the difference between moms and dads. I remember when my oldest son, Sage, was playing 4 or 5-year-old soccer. And he was running down the field, and this other kid shoved him out of bounds, and he fell and scarred himself up. And his mother went, "Oh, my God, oh, my God, oh, my God, oh, my God." And he looked at me and I said, "Get out there." So he went back out there, and they came running down the sideline again. And Sage sent this kid flying. Problem solved. So that's the kind of independence I think that kids today need to express, need to have. And it's just that so many parents are so scared, and they've scared their kids of the real world. I mean, it can be very frightening if you drum it up, or it can be exciting and intoxicating if that's the way you drum it up.
Let's take that moment as a father, from a father's perspective. In that moment, you knew you had to say that to your son.
Right.
You may not have wanted to necessarily be that harsh, though. I mean, the love you have for your son.
Oh, he knows I adore him, but
right.
Get out there.
But you did what you had to do, and
Right.
that's again the other thing with parents these days is, and some baby boomer parents, they don't want to suffer. They don't want to have the hard talk or the hurt ache.
Oh, that brings up a whole nother topic. That brings up a whole other topic.
Episode 2.
Episode 2.
Right? And coming up on episode 2, we're going to be discussing social media, which is huge.
That's like 10 episodes.
Right.
We'll see if we can get that into 30 minutes or whatever. It's like, yeah, and social media is a huge problem. We've mentioned it here that it can be a source of bullying, and it can drive kids out of their minds, and parents allow it, which once again you wonder, do you ever look at your kid's phone? So, all right. Well, we need to close out now. This has been great fun for the first show. So, thanks for listening today. I want to thank you to Kristin and to Kathleen for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
You can find me everywhere in bookstores. You can find me at harryhharrisonjr.com on Facebook. You can find me at fearlessparenting.com. I said Harry H. Harrison Jr. author on Facebook. At Harry H. Harrison J. on Twitter. On Instagram, Harry H. Harrison Jr. And then on the web, fearlessparenting.com. So let me ask my two guests, have anything to add? Kristin.
Well, as Harry mentioned earlier in the episode, he is the author of Father to Son, Life Lessons on Raising a Boy. It's a fantastic book, over 1 million copies sold, and you can pick it up anywhere books are available. I encourage you to go out, get your copy, and read it so you can really understand the advice that Harry is giving and where he's coming from. And if you want to follow me and my son's adventures, you can follow us on Instagram at Places Will Goes.
And for me, my favorite book is the 1001 Things You Need for College. That one is fascinating. I wish I had known about that book before I went to college these many years ago.
So do I.
And you can
things.
follow me in my misadventures at Snoop and Juju. That's named after my dog and my daughter. Harry's shaking his head at me.
And be sure to get all of the information on Harry's upcoming episodes at realnewscn.com. That's where you can download the podcast, and we'll have more great episodes coming up featuring Harry and all of his expert parenting advice.
So thank you, guys. It's been a wonderful 30 minutes. Thank you, Zach, for your brilliant producing. And we will talk to you, next week? 2 weeks? Next week.
You're listening to RNCN, the digital destination for premium talk radio.